Realized that I was going to have to learn at least one poem, and the only poem I'd ever recited was in the 7th grade, a poem, Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. But it had been quite a few years since I had learned that, but over the years I remembered that poem, and then I added to it a companion Rudyard Kipling poem, and over the years added many more Rudyard Kipling, some Robert Service, and other poems, Robert Frost, and but anyway, and so I would like to, and what I'm doing today, as I sit here in Blanco County, Texas, just outside High Texas, between Johnson City and Stonewall, I'm getting a friend, Chad Martin, and his helper, Q, to hopefully record some of these recitations so that they'll have them for my great-grandchildren someday, assuming they're interested in poetry, which hopefully they will be. Anyway, poems generally, I say they are like lawyers and nuns, and they come in pairs, so you'll generally get two poems that are matched to each other at a time. Also, poems need a lead-in that tell you something about the poem, so you'll be prepared for what the poem says and won't have to stop to realize what's going on. So anyway, I'm ready to go ahead and start on reciting poems, and I'll start with a lead-in that goes like this. If you grew up in Houston, Texas in the 1940s and 50s, and incidentally, if I'm doing Kipling or any English poetry writer, I'll have a phony Texas English accent. If you grew up in Houston, Texas in the 1940s and 50s, and you attended a private coeducational day school by the name of St. John's School, you were expected to develop a certain familiarity with the classical languages. And so in the 8th class, Mrs. Mayers taught a course called Languages, and we learned about prefixes, suffixes, and word roots with Latin and Greek derivations. In the 9th class, E.K. Sauls taught first-year Latin, and in the 10th class, we were privileged to study and serve under the command of a British paratrooper by the name of Basil Fairweather, who taught second-year Latin, mostly about Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic Wars. And it seems that Mr. Fairweather was always making a few commentaries about his war, which was the Second World War. One particularly gripping story, Mr. Fairweather was parachuted into France behind the German lines, got caught in a fierce counterattack, ended up on a forced march, 60 hours non-stop, fighting his way back through the German lines to get to Dunkirk, and one of the last boats off alive. And whenever his students would complain of a Latin translation too long, too many vocabulary words, some other oppressive assignment, Mr. Fairweather would shriek at us, "Yours is not to make reply, yours is not to reason why, yours is but to do and die. Do what you were told. Someday your life may depend upon it. Mine did. I did what I was told, and I'm here to tell you about it. Stop sniveling." Well, we snivelled a lot in Latin too, and so, in honor of Basil Fairweather, and in honor of all good soldiers from Balaclava to Vietnam, who did not make reply, who did not reason why, who did their duty and died, I shall recite from Alfred Lord Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade, which is a literary tribute to one of the greatest military blunders of all time, which was converted into one of the great hero stories of all time by the superhuman discipline and courage of a small band of English horsemen. I shall follow that poem with a companion Rudyard Kipling poem in honor of all good soldiers from Balaclava to Vietnam that did not make reply, that did not reason why, that did not go to Canada and did not die, but instead did their duty, and had the unmitigated gall to come home to an ungrateful country. But first, Lord Tennyson. But before I do Lord Tennyson, we're going to have a brief pause while I put on my mustache so that you will maybe, if it'll stick, be able to enjoy it as if it was almost being given by Rudyard Kipling, who always had this kind of a mustache. So let me put this on. Okay, Alfred Lord Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. All in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? No, not though the soldiers knew. Someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply. Theirs not to reason why. Theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannons to the right of them, cannons to the left of them, cannons in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed it with shot and shell. Boldly they rode and well into the jaws of death. Into the mouth of hell rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabring the gunners there, charging an army while the whole world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the lines they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannons to the right of them, cannons to the left of them, cannons behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They, who had fought so well, came out of the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made, all the world wondered, honored the charge they made, honored the Light Brigade, noble 600. Now Kipling. There were 30 million English that talked of England's might, and there were 20 broken troopers who lacked their bed for the night. They had neither food nor money, they had neither service nor trade. They were only shiftless soldiers, the last of the Light Brigade. They believed that life was fleeting. They knew not that art was long, that though they were dying of famine, they lived in deathless song. They asked for little money to keep the wolf from the door, and those 30 million English sent 20 pounds and 4. They laid their heads together. They were scarred and lined in gray. Keen were the Russian sabres, but want was keener than they. So the old troop sergeant muttered, "Let us go to the man who writes the things on balaclava, the kiddies at school recites." So they went without bands or colors, a regiment 10 files strong, to look for the master singer who had crowned them all in his song. And awaiting his servant's order by the garden gate they stayed, a desolate little cluster, the last of the Light Brigade. They strove to stand to attention, to straighten their toil-bowed backs. They drilled on an empty stomach. The loose-knit files fell slack. With stooping of weary shoulders and garments tattered and frayed, they shambled into his presence, the last of the Light Brigade. And the old troop sergeant was spokesman, and begging your pardon, he said, "You wrote to the Light Brigade, sir. Here's all that isn't dead. And it's all come true what you wrote, sir, regarding the mouth of hell, for we're all of us nigh to the workhouse, and we thought we'd call and tell." "No, thank you. We don't want food, sir, but couldn't you take and write a sort of to be continued and see next page of the fight? We think that someone has blundered, and couldn't you tell him how? You wrote we were heroes once, sir. Please write, we're starving now." With the poor little army departed, limping, lean and forlorn, and the heart of the master singer grew hot with a scorn of scorns, and he wrote for them wonderful verses that set the land like flame, till the fatted souls of the English were scourged with a thing called shame. With 30 million English that babble of England's might, behold, there are 20 heroes who lack their food tonight. Our children's children are lisping to honor the charge they made, and we leave to the streets and the workhouse the charge of the Light Brigade. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered, honored the charge they made, honored the Light Brigade, noble 600.